This probably is my third session at IIT on this same subject of compliance management for startups. Uh, See, I want you to understand that if when we go through these various requirements of law, we will be speaking in terms of the penalties, fines, and things like that. So what I don't want you to take it that this is a negative way to look at it, but the reason why that is done is to basically impress upon you that there are specific requirements in law, and if you don't conform to it, uh, you will be facing a lot of penalties. And off late, earlier we used to, many of these penalties, it used to happen more by exception because there were not enough of tracking down on compliance. But off late, with the uh, you must appreciate that the government is also getting a lot more digital, so they are tracking down these compliances, and you are getting fair amount of notices for show cause notices saying why penalty should not be levied. Now, for a startup, like many startups, like many of you are, uh, it's the implications are twofold. Point number one is there is a cash outflow. No, that money, you'll see that the amounts can be a little stiff. So there's a money outflow, and from your perspective, when every rupee counts, you would rather spend that money into something more constructive than going and paying penalties of the nature that is. Point number two is it can be extremely distractive. Now, some of them, somebody issues a penalty, and you are asked to appear before a legal officer or a court or things like that. Again, that again is a distraction. You'll have something more important fixed up. You'll get a notice, and you suddenly say that I have to go and explain. It's possible that some may take a lenient view and be done with the penalty and give it nominal amount. But nonetheless, if there is a time value, there is a value for time, then there is your it's a double whammy. Point number three is, and sometimes most important is, many of you all at some point would be going in for fundraisers from third party professional investors or even other investors. Then what happens is they sort of these penalties, these fines, these non-compliances can pose serious problems on your fundraising efforts. We have had a couple of cases, as a matter of fact, where the investors have reverted back to the entrepreneurs and told them that you shut down the old company and start a new company, you'll invest it, because there are so many non-compliances. So, cutting over and moving into a new entity, there are other implications. You have to go, and if you are already registered as a vendor with any large corporates, going with a new entity and going through the whole process is a big pain. So, look at the whole the presentation and the various laws that I'm probably discussing with you with a more positive compliance from a perspective, that and say not say, oh, is it so bad that we will be penalized and fined for everything. So that's the point I want to place before you. Now, if I before we start getting into the legal part of the laws, I think it's very important that we understand that how is the legal framework in Indian legal system evolved. So, the parliament is the ultimate authority for the laws of the land. Any law will have to require the parliament approval. If it's a state subject, it will be the state legislative assembly. In some cases, the president or the governor can come up with ordinances. That is to circumvent the when the parliament is not in session, or when the assembly is not in session, it becomes in the important to have a legislation in place for something. Then the president under the executive directions will issue an ordinance, which the ordinance in India will have a limited life of 6 months. If an ordinance is not approved within 6 months by the parliament or the legislative, that will lapse. It will have to be repromulgated for life. So that is how it happens. And then you have to also believe, you also have to remember that the secondary source of law is also from the judicial pronouncements. Now the law will be in a particular manner that is interpreted over a period of time by various courts, and there that becomes the interpretation of the courts over a period of time also become the laws of the land. So it will have to be read in conjunction with these original laws, so that there is a law, then there is this legal pronouncements. Even there is a hierarchy. Now is always the starting point will be the Supreme Court. Any law interpreted or by the Supreme Court becomes applicable throughout India. It is that's the first this thing. Then you have the high courts. Within the high courts of the location, the jurisdiction will also will take precedence over the other high court rulings. So suppose if the High Court of Madras, how many of you all know that it's still known as High Court of Madras? It's not High Court of Chennai. The decision has to be taken by the High Court for amending, because it's in the constitution, it says High Court of Madras. So you will still see that it's like IIT Madras is one of them. High Court is also still Madras. So High Court of Madras will have precedence over, suppose if it's a decision of say High Court of Karnataka. Then if there are two decisions, and then the decision in of High Court of Madras will take precedence over that of Karnataka, so on and so forth. Then we have the subordinate courts, the civil courts, family courts, and things like that. So this is how the law flows down in the Indian system. Now, who makes the laws? Now the constitution actually has divided into three parts. Why I am saying all this is, as entrepreneurs, you suppose you want to know where the law is residing, who has got the powers to make laws, we need to understand where is it stipulated. So the union list is all those are all those laws where the central government will stipulate the laws. And then you have the state list, where the state is given exclusive powers to implement those laws. And then, like many cases where when in doubt, there is something called a concurrent list, where the central government and state government can make the laws. Inevitably central government will make one law, which the state government will start implementing through it the rules. So it's a concurrent list. You can have so you have issues relating to some of them which will come under the concurrent list. So from your perspective as entrepreneurs, when you are starting a business or a profession, you need to understand what will be the applicable laws to my company or my product, and in that context it will become necessary for you to say, okay, if this is my product, this is my place of business, who will be the person who will be making the laws, and whose pronouncements will become relevant for me to go and start monitoring. Because suppose it's something is and in today it's a issue which many of you all in the digital context will be confronted with. Uh, the telecommunications. Information and broadcasting always comes under the ministry central government. Information broadcasting, telecommunication. So you have to be very careful in trying to understand whether any of your products or services or applications or whatever it is will have a bearing on that part of it, so that there are specific rules associated with it. Now, for the sake of understanding, how many of in this group are in manufacturing? Services? Okay, then service. Do I presume that all others are in services? So any particular software? Any which element discipline in software are you? Is it a 3D imaging? What do you? Structural construction in this, but you give designs to the so it will also be a service. Oh. Huh? Underground blueprint of utilities. Okay. You will have to probably check if any of the blueprints that you give has a bearing on security. Check out on that, because suddenly you may find that you are having the blueprint of all the state utilities. Someone has said, do you have the are you authorized to hold or give copies of it? I'm just thinking aloud. Just these, because suddenly some of these hit you suddenly and you say, oh, how come I didn't think of it? Okay, that's one aspect as I can, because today, because everyone is paranoid about security, physical security as much as information security, whether the blueprint of security could have implications if a private person has it. So you have some license, or how do you access it? Uh, 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 uh. No, even then I just check, I have feelings that you may somewhere you suddenly will come up with somebody saying that this is a blueprint. See many cases in, okay, the municipalities, all the government departments are very good in the legal process, but just to be clear, you would have to ensure that part of it. How about you? Manufacturing of vehicle motors. Educational. Okay. Air pollution. Okay. You said software. In which part of healthcare? You said you are manufacturing, right? Okay. Okay. Fine. So we have, again, as I said, we have the hierarchy. First is the act. You always have to look at, there's always this thing is saying the act, as I said, depending upon who's the which legislative body passes it, whether it is a parliament or this thing. Then we have the rules. Many a times what you have to be really careful about is that the implementation is in the rules. So you have to be very careful. It is not just about a plain reading of the act. The compliance to the act is done through the rules. So there are forms and other things that you have to fill up and submit and things like that. So you will have to look at what the rules are. Then from time to time the department issues notifications. The various departments issues notifications. That also becomes you have to comply with those notifications, because some rule would have empowered the department to notify compliance to various provisions of law, and you will be reading the law, then you will, if you leave your notification and don't comply with the notifications, you could again say you are not complied with this notification. So, you have to you need to understand what the act is, what the rule is, and what the notification is. Then there is next in the hierarchy is something called as circulars. Circulars are basically more in the nature of sometimes clarificatory in nature. They cannot impose any additional burden on the person who has to comply with it, but they are good to know what the thought process of implementation is. So, you also have to start looking at what are the circulars, and then as I said, then you have the last of this thing is the judicial pronouncements. So, you will find that when you come to the legal system in this thing, all of them have a very important and vital role to play in the process. Now, when I over the next hour or so, I will be taking you through basically business laws in only. I will be my focus is on the business and business part of the laws. I will be talking about corporate or existential, then operations, then you have labor, then you have taxation. Remember that as people from mostly from the engineering background, I presume, we always look at it saying, looking at a process, we mean first thing we remember is, okay, men, machines, materials and methods. Okay, that is the first thing that we start looking at and saying, how do you define a process? Some will have men, will have some materials, some will have the machines, and some will have the methods that are there. The law also, to a large extent, you will find is conforming to goes through the same process. You will have laws relating to material, you will have laws relating to men, you will have laws relating to machinery and how equipments are to be used, and sometimes even to methods that are being deployed. So, you find that laws also will have. So, when you are looking especially from operation perspective, you need to also understand what are the laws relating to methods. So, as I see it, you do not have too many of you all in the manufacturing part of it, but you still will have those issues relating to, in some form or the other, you will be confronted with this. Now, what are the type of legal entities that we can think of? How many of you all are private limited companies, own private limited companies, LLPs? So, all are private limited companies. So, you will be, what will be applicable to you is the Companies Act of 2013. Then we have the next level is called the LLPs, limited liability partnerships, which is actually a intermediary form between a partnership and a private limited company. The compliances levels are much lower in the context of the LLPs, but in a private limited company the compliances are very high. You have to be very careful, because you have incorporated it, especially if you are going to raise funds and things like that. It is better to have it as a private limited company. Otherwise, at some point of time, it may not be a bad idea to even convert yourself into an LLP and be done with it, because over a period of time the compliance levels are a lot less rigorous than what it would be for a private limited company or a limited company. Personally, I have been recommending most professionals who come to me saying, are you planning to raise funds at any point of time from third party investors? If the answer is no, or I think that the chances that they raise funds is going to be limited, I say, okay, start with a limited liability company, because it becomes easier to go on compliance, is a lot more flexibility is available within the system to deal with it. Then you have the Partnership Act, which is of 1932. Okay, you must remember that the Indian law is, we are more British than the British in many ways. You have laws going back to 1882 and 1886 and things like that are still in vogue. I keep as a person from a finance background, I keep saying that you know what is the law relating to uh, the banking operations and systems in India, which is the primary law, and then there are other plugins like many of you all would want to call it. Anyone wants to hazard a guess? Eh? No. The banking operations largely are driven by something called the Negotiable Instruments Act. And you know what vintage it is? 1886. And today, think of it, so many of us go through all these electronic e-banking and NEFT and all that, the RTGS and things like that. When the banking system, this thing, nobody had even thought of computers probably at that. Okay, they have to be read in conjunction with the Information Technology Act and so on and so forth. But then nonetheless, the number of laws that have even the Companies Act 2013 is a relatively recent this thing, because it's been still implemented in phases only, because we still, many of us, at least people from my vintage, immediately will start, when it comes, I'll start saying, okay, what is the section in the Act of 1956, because we have learned over 40 years to just go through that act, and we are more conversant with the laws relating to that. So immediately we get this thing and say, sometimes I'll say, oh, call my student and say, okay, what is the law, corresponding law under the 2013 Act. But the point is, many of our laws, we are required to register. If you own a product or an antique which is more than 100 years old, you are supposed to go and register it. Are you aware? Are you aware that you are supposed to go and register the government under the Antiques Act? So, but the government itself has so many acts which are, recently, a couple of years back, there are a couple of enactments which in UK they repealed because they were more applicable to India. That is about 3 or 4 years back they repealed some laws. But that's the unfortunate part. We still are living with a lot of legacy enactments. As I said, then we have the Limited Liability Partnership which I spoke, and then the Foreign Exchange Management Act. Now, this Foreign Exchange Management Act is very important, especially if you are dealing with anything that has imports, export, receiving money from abroad or remitting money abroad. Now, if you have anything of that, please be careful, because I always used to say two enactments that I will not like to violate at any point of time if I am given a choice, is FEMA and the erstwhile excise, which is relating to manufacturing, which is no, but though it comes under GST, it's still called the excise department. They can ask, they can probe, they can get under your skin, and you'll really get vexed to the whole process. So, so as I said, this is a central government, this thing which replaced the Act of 1956. Again, the non-compliances, as I said, I don't want to, while I say there are a lot of things that you are permitted to do, there is a lot of things that if you don't do has penal implications. And if you have any doubts on whether you can do or not do, I'll clarify that. And if I am not able to clarify it across the table here, you can rest assured, you can send me a mail and I'll send you a clarification on that. Now, you have to maintain books of accounts. If you don't maintain, the minimum penalty is 50,000, the maximum penalty is 5 lakhs, and you can sometimes be imprisoned also for 1 year. Then you have to, if you have a board of directors, you should have a minimum of 2 directors. I presume that all of you all are private limited companies. Okay, so it's only 2. If it's a public limited company, you need to have 3. Okay, and you are not supposed to give any loans to directors. You cannot give any loans to directors. That's a prohibited. And if you look at it, the implications on that is the highest. The penalty is 5 lakhs and can go up to 25 lakhs also. Now, for a board meeting, you should have not less than 4 board meetings in a year. That is, every quarter you should have a board meeting, and there should not be a gap of more than 90 days between 2 meetings. So you cannot have one meeting, say if you have one meeting, no, I think it's 120 days. You have one meeting on 1st of April, you cannot have the second meeting of the second quarter later than 31st of July, because there will be a gap of more than 120 days if you held a meeting with one of the directors should always be a resident in India. Okay. Then if you become any person who knows after he is being disqualified and he does not act on it, you are penalized. Then you have to have default in a board report. There are lot of things that you are supposed to stipulate in a board report, and you are expected to disclose all of that. If you don't disclose that, that is also a default. Let me ask you a very simple question. How many of y'all have in the past years sat and wrote a director's report yourself, and you just allowed your chartered accountant or somebody to company secretary to write the report and you said signed it? How many? Be honest about it. Auditor, everybody does it. Whose company is it? Is it the auditor's company or your company? See, you may say that at the end of the day it is your company and you know what you are the shareholder, you are this thing, and you know what the company is doing. But how many of you all are aware that your company's accounts and annual reports are downloaded by so many people and looked at it before they come and speak to you? If you don't communicate about your organization through the director's report, how will anybody know about it? So please, for your own business sake, spend half an hour, 45 minutes articulating what your company has done in the previous year and say, this is my contribution to the director's report, because that will be read by outsiders. Many of your, I know many customers who are planning to give large orders to companies, sometimes as a part of their own corporate protocol, go and download the financial statements of some of the vendors whom they are dealing with, and like to see, okay, what is this company's strength? Is it profit making? Is it operational? What is the type of business that they, all of which can be only articulated in a director's report. If you don't state it in your director's report, how will they know? Then you have to hold an annual general meeting every year, which is not later than 6 months from the end of the year, which means if in India all companies are expected to close their accounts on 31st of March. How many are aware of that? How many of you all are aware that the possibility that it may change to the calendar year? There is a possibility, and a very, very strong possibility, but because I was reading a couple of days back in the news report which says departments have been asked to budget for the calendar year, which means everything will change with reference to the calendar. We were expecting it to happen in 2017, but because of the GST rollout and things like that, they didn't want to tamper with one more thing and make it miserable. 2018 too close to an election year. If anything went wrong, they'll all be piling. So I expect, if not in 2019, definitely in 2020. So again, it makes a lot of sense because globally everyone is following the calendar year as the non-maintenance of minutes of all proceedings. I want you to understand that there is a penalty, minimum, maximum, and there is sometimes an imprisonment also. Not see, you must remember the provision sometimes says may be imprisonment, which means it is discretionary, and some will say shall be imprisoned, means it's you will definitely go. Now, for instance, I don't know if you read in the papers a couple of days back about this famous scion of the one of the large industrial houses who was convicted of having synthetic drugs in his pocket in Japan, and he was convicted for 2 years. It's a suspended sentence of 5 years, which means he can go, and if he again it gets repeated, he will go, it will this thing. But the moment that happened, the stocks of that company in India dropped by 30%, and that person has been today morning's paper also said that he's been there are other independent directors asking him to step down from the board of directors of the company. So the conviction, the imprisonment sometimes is very strong implications. So you may say it's a small issue, but suppose somebody passes an order and saying imprisonment, it doesn't happen. I'm not here, I'm not saying trying to present a doomsday scenario, but I'm saying, like for instance, inevitably sometimes your competitors are digging up all your past history for the wrong reasons. I know cases where competitors send to the commercial department saying you are dealing with this company, this company's director or this company has been convicted of this, so avoid doing it. And then it goes to somebody and say you're not, see, at the end of the day, many of us, including my firm, after all its existence over the years, are not indispensable to an organization, correct? They may say, why do I want to get into a controversy dealing with him? So, and everything is linked today. Your Aadhaar, your PAN, your DIN, and every company that you are associated with it, I can go and see which companies you are associated. Have you gone and seen it? How many of you all have gone and seen? You can go, if you go to your company site and just click the DIN, it will tell you who are the companies. Same way, if you go to your competitors and click, you know which companies he's got interest in. So anybody will know where it is. So then the filing of annual return after the expiry of 270 days, you have to file it within 60 days. If you file it after 270 days, see what the fine is. You look at when you enter into a contract to the related party, if it's the related party has got one shopping list of people who are considered as your related party. Everybody, barring your cousins, everybody else is a related party. Second level. So if you enter into a contract, if you don't mention that if it is not entered into with the consent of the board of directors, it can again be penalized. It can be set aside. It can be made voidable. So if you think that there is a faintest possible chance that you are entering into a transaction with the related party, completely disclose it in the minutes and the record it. There is nothing for a private limited company, there is no compliance related, but disclosure is a must. Then acceptance of deposits. This is a strict no. You cannot accept any monies from any outsiders other than the directors or relatives. It's a strict no. And the penalties in that, you see the penalty there. It can go up to 2 crores. So it's a strict no, because, and many times we raise share capital, we want to raise money. There is a process associated with it. The moment you are raising share capital, you are supposed to keep it in a separate account, allot the shares, only then transfer it back to your regular account and start using it. If you use it before the allotment is done, it is an offence, and that also can be penalized. So, many of this, your auditors will come to know about it much later, only when they are auditing the accounts. But these are actions that you have to take when you are engaging in a transaction, and at that particular point of time it may become too late for you to sort of cover the tracks. And I'm conscious of the word when I say cover the tracks, because many times we also sit down and say, okay, can we, youngster doesn't know, how do we help him to get over this problem.
In the last case, if it is like a deal like convertible note or convertible equity kind of thing, then how is that going to be?
That's okay. Even there there's a, you see convertible, what convertible with reference to what? It must, no, see again, you convertible debt in India is permissible only under certain specified circumstances. Okay, which is your depository notes and things like that. That you must have a minimum of 25 lakhs. Debt convertible note is unless you go for a debenture. Okay, even a debenture you are supposed to make the allotment, file the returns and only then use it. Then the other possible convertible note is a preference shares, where you issue preference shares and then subsequently convert it into equity. They are it either by compulsorily convertible this thing, or it's a optionally convertible preference shares. There are three parts. There is one is compulsory, then another is optional, then something is redeemable. If you are talking of debt instruments into convertibles, last year the government came up with some guidelines, especially for startups. You have to be in compliance with that. Anything other than that, there is some, when you say a deposit, there is something called an exempted deposit. First thing that we will see is when a money is received from an individual by a company, we will first go and check up from an audit perspective, checklist, we say, is it an exempted deposit or not? Exempted, that is, it will not be considered as a deposit.
Is there any amount?
No amount. It is, again, as I said, it's more dependent on source and what is the background on that. So at this point of time, I will suffice to say you can only take from directors or close relatives. Don't take money, because that's a, strictly speaking, no.
So not even the shareholders?
No, that was earlier, now there, now it is not even, that has been cut out.
Shareholders can't give. Only directors and family members.
Close relatives, better to check it out in every case, because it says only close relatives.
And what we give back to the close relatives in return, or it's a loan?
It's only a loan.
It's a loan.
Loan.
Not a gift.
You cannot make a gift to a company, because if you make a company to a gift to a company, you will have other implications under the Income Tax Act. That's a separate problem.
So it's always a loan, director's loan or
Director's loan only.
and it has to be written back.
Yeah, you document it saying that pay when able.
Whenever.
But
Where it is recorded or released in the books?
books, it will come, no, automatically it will come on your liability. When you receive money, so when you receive money from outside, what will have only two implications. Either I am getting it as a liability, which means I have to repay, or it's my capital, which also technically I have to repay, or it's my income. Only two possibilities are there. Or when I get a money, I am getting it in when where my asset is getting charged. My customer is paying me, my receivables is coming down and my cash is going up. It's a switch of an asset or a reduction in or an increase in the liability. Only two possibilities are there when money comes in. Okay, so especially when you are receiving money in the nature which is not an income for you, please check it out with your legal auditors or whoever.
What about cash price awards money?
That is also, that is, you can, those is a cash prices and things are taxable, no? That is an income for you. If you won a contest or you this thing, that is a problem. But you have to offer it as an income. Or see, so government grant is there. So many of you all might have received government grants. And those are grants. That is not received as it is not as a deposit. You can receive money from a government and things like that. From a corporate, you can receive intercorporate loans. But from an individual you cannot. Even if you say it's an advance for a supply, you must establish that the supply is being completed within a specified period of time. So these are ticklish problems that you will, because when you go through a due diligence, when somebody is investing money, these are all red flags for them, because this will have implications on their investment.
Sir, I have a doubt regarding the general meeting for directors. It can be done over Skype or over phone,
It must be recorded.
and how long should we keep the record?
Now that you will have the 8 years. Keep it on cloud, no Zoom and all is there, keep it on cloud and move to some Google Drive or something and keep it. Recorded, it must be recorded. Permitted to, you cannot just say now meeting we will record it. When you say board meeting, you have to give a notice of board meeting, you have to give the agenda, you have to go through this thing and go through all the rigmarole of complying with the fancy things, but you have to be in a regulated manner. Now, okay, reservation of many of you all already have applied for company this thing, so it may not be much of a thing. But if you make any changes to articles of memorandum of association, it has to be reported and taken on record. Again, you have to disclose in April every year to the board all the companies in which you are a member or a director. Have you done it? No, you have first to take it on record. The company has to take it on record. You don't have to file it anywhere.
No, but we are not part of it.
No, even if you are nil, you have to file. Start of every financial year. Okay, every company is supposed to have a registered office. This is a new compliance. This thing. Now this is one start. How many of you all took your photos and uploaded into the this thing into the MCA portal? You did not. So that they've extended time till 15th of June. Otherwise, you'll have another penalty of 10,000 rupees on that. You ask me if I did it, I'll say no. I knew it will get postponed. so that's the advantage of knowing where it is. So, but if it had caught me on the wrong foot, I was in trouble. So the point is, you have to, that I'll show you this thing. So again, as I say, KYC norms, rule 12A and this thing, 5,000 rupees, non-filing of 22A. These are all the penalties. These are all the things that have come in the recent past. If you don't furnish your DIN, earlier at least many of us did not have DIN. Now everybody has. The DIN is a mandatory, otherwise you cannot have this thing. The concept of DIN is only a recent phenomenon. It's only a last 5-6 years. But it became mandatory that everybody have the DINs updated and thicker. But if you don't disclose, failure to furnish or disclose this will also have implications.
So what is the first rule 3 and 22?
The DIR 3, Directors Information Rule, that is 3. That is every director has to give upload their KYC of the directors.
It has to be renewed every year.
Now they are saying that it is to be done every year. April 30th it was. I think they have extended that one also. So better to go and check that out all. 22A is a registered office. I told you, no, active location. That is every shareholder, who are your shareholders in your company is. Anybody, it's supposed to be a public document. I can come and inspect in your office.
But we have a shareholder register.
Register, that's only. Remember, the register, that's enough. Yeah, if you say an RO, if you say tell your company secretary, he'll give you an all-in-one book, and they say that's your book forever.
And should be kept in the head office.
Registered office.
Always there.
At the registered office.
And the registered office should always have a name plate.
Have a nameplate outside in both the English and vernacular language. It should have the SIN number, GST number also. That see again, no, the problem is, as I said, co-working and all these are alien to the legal system. As still we are light years away from if you go and see a startup, more often than not the startup works out of cafe coffee day or the lobbies of hotels, because most of our meetings happen there and somebody says okay come there, we'll sit and have a cup of coffee and things like that. No, that and how many startups are having offices that you can sit down and work through the so you work out of an incubation center, or you working with the shared spaces. You go to Bombay, during the day it is a shared workspace, evening it becomes a bar. So I'm saying the so I suppose the legal framework unfortunately has not caught up with the current the thought process of the millennials. So it is going to be, it will take some more time before these are, it will, you know, the reaction time is slow, because somebody will come back and say, no, what happened, you know, what if type, you know, one chartered accountant like me say, or what if, how will I establish that this seat belongs to this company, that seat belongs to this company, where do I, you know, these are all issues that will come up. They'll have to address all that, they'll have to come out with rules for all of that. By the time you yourself would have moved and gone back to somebody, you would have outgrown it and gone to some other place. But these are realities that we have to deal with. So since it is Partnership Act, is, you are not, many of you are not, but even here I would very strongly suggest that if you are dealing with a partnership firm, if you are dealing with a partnership firm for any of your, especially if it is a customer or especially if it is this thing, check whether they are registered or not. Every partnership firm is also supposed to be registered under the Partnership Act. It may be a good idea to check it out and get their registration number, so that suppose there is a dispute between them, you will get into crossfires among in that. Okay, so since you don't have anything, I'll go through that. Limited liability partnership, as I said, it's a partnership for all practical purposes, but registered under the Act itself. Again, the advantage is the Partnership Act has an unlimited liability. That is, the liabilities of the firm can flow into you as an individual. That used to be the big risk that we were always facing. So to address that part of the problem, they came up with this concept of limited liability partnership, where it is again a partnership firm. You have flexibility of inducting and a lot of things you can do without a major this thing, but you will does not have the same rigors of a private limited. You don't have to maintain minutes books and too many annual returns. You get to office one return, you get off from office another return. That those type of these things under the Companies Act is not there. But even there, it has some things, like for instance, maintenance of books is a on an you can follow either on cash basis or on accrual basis. In Companies Act, you are supposed to follow only accrual basis. Remember, what you understand what the accrual basis is? When you say accrual, if you have completed your job and you are eligible to receive the money commercially under the contract with the customer, you are supposed to account for that as an income. So that is a critical requirement. But in a LLP, you can be both, either on cash basis, which means when I receive it, I account it as income. If I don't receive it, I don't. When you raise an invoice, you don't necessarily have to account it. You can account it and then deduct it at a later point, saying that I'm accounting it on a cash basis. So you have to, if there are any changes in the partnership, you have to do this thing by 30 days. That within 30 days, annual return has to be filed within 30th of May. Foreign Exchange Management Act, as I said, this is a very critical one. There are two types of transactions under the foreign, which all foreign exchange transactions in India is governed under the FEMA, which is the regulator is the Reserve Bank of India. So there are two things. One is a current account transactions and there is a capital account transactions. Whatever import, export, all that is there, it's a current account transactions. By and large, there is no restrictions in India. Reasonably, you can go through without a serious. You don't require prior approvals and things like that. But capital account transactions are reasonably controlled. There is a fair amount of reporting that you have to do. So if you are receiving money from any of your non-resident friends and things like that, it all requires report. You need to check out whether there is reporting requirements that is required under the FEMA. So because I know many startups has, their friends sitting abroad, they say, okay, I'll support you for $1,000, $5,000, $10,000. It's small, maybe small amount. They remit it. It comes into the company. Suddenly you find, has this been reported? Not reported. It's a problem. And penalties under FEMA is also very stiff, very stiff. You look a little concerned. Okay. That is current account transactions. Buying out a transaction, see, there, as I said, so there are two things. One is current account transaction, one is capital account transaction. Import export by and large is not a problem. Either it import of services or import of equipment. There you have to see whether it is, there you have to see only whether it is a prohibited item under the customs and other things you have to see. For the documentation and import duty and all that is you pay on customs duty and things like that. That is not an issue at all. Those are not issues that you have to deal with. It's only on the capital account that I am more concerned. Like you receive money, somebody is investing into your company. You are supposed to, within 30 days you have to invest, you have to report this thing. Within 6 months you have to intimate the allotment of shares. If you don't do all that, it becomes this. So if you are investing in a company abroad, you have to go through a process. All that is extremely critical. As an individual, even here in India, you can say up to $250,000. You can, there is something called a liberalized exchange remittance management program. There is no every year you can remit to $250,000. Actually, RBI itself says it's a no questions asked. It's a discretionary. You can do what you want. But actually, so on a current account basis, really that much in things. But from a corporate capital account transactions, reporting requirements are very stiff. So when you are dealing with foreign currency, foreign exchange issues, please first always speak to your company secretary or chartered accountant, saying, do I have any reporting requirements on this? If it is not, move forward. It's always better to take that clearance before you engage into some transactions. If you are exporting, you have to get the monies into India within 6 months. Otherwise, you have to go and seek specific approval from Reserve Bank for approval. Sometimes they are given general approval up to 365 days. But beyond that, definitely you have to get, so they will ask you why it is. So if you have exported and suppose there is a dispute or there is something they have not remitted it and things like that. To write off an export receivable, you have to get approval from Reserve Bank. Except all those who are registered as a star exporter, they can write off up to 10% of their average exports over the last 3-4 years. All those, that is permissible. But for a layman like you and me, you cannot do that. You have to go and get specific approval. If you have received or invested abroad, there is something called an FLA return. You have to file before 15th of July. Now, that is as far as some of the existential laws are concerned. I will be going into the operational laws. Any questions on the existential ones? Fair enough. Now, if you are in the manufacturing and you are employing 10 or more people, you are supposed to be registered under the Factories Act.
Those things are not applicable for interns and all, only for full time.
No, if you are manufacturing, are you manufacturing? See, that's a problem. That is gone up to Supreme Court itself. See, even repackaging is manufacturing. No, R&D is not generally, but again you have to be careful. See, because when your business is in manufacturing and you are dealing with materials or machines and things like that, and it can be construed as this thing. So, it's better always go to and look at them and tick off to this thing saying you do not come, because if you come you have to comply. Now, like for instance, see, I know there are people who have come back and said, you say I print out utility maps, utility this thing. Now there is a possibility that some jack will come back and say, is this manufacturing? Because you are giving some manufacturing something and giving it as a printout, you are giving you are doing it and giving it to somebody. But there are definitions which are saying no, it doesn't. By and large, I am not. So always best to check out if you are you a manufacturing or not, because the definition, as you very rightly asked us, what is manufacturing, is so more. I would more inclined to believe that whether yours or architecture, all are we are all services, because it does not this thing. But there have been cases where people have said you have it. The input and output have undergone a change, and therefore that is manufacturing. I have printed something, and it is done in a large scale repetitive manner. So printing press is a manufacturing. No, you will have to distinguish why I am not a printing press, why I am this. So you will have to distinguish to say therefore I am not. So we have to better to go back into each case and say, do we come under any specific laws that require compliance. See, as long as you are aware, conscious of it, and you have explainable reasons for what you are doing, everything is acceptable. But it's only when suddenly when somebody comes and asks, you cannot say no, this is not in syllabus. No, I don't. No. See, I wouldn't recommend that, because the moment you get into that, go and register yourself, there is a lot of compliance. They will ask you, have you filed this, have you done this, have you done that, and things like that. See, it's on a need to know basis. It's again like information only. It's on a need to know. If I am liable to get registered, if I am a factory, I will get registered. If I am not a factory, there is no need to register yourself. Okay, but you may not be a factory, but you may be a you will have to necessarily come and get registered under the Shops and Establishment Act. Okay, how many of you are registered under the okay, Tamil Nadu does not. Tamil Nadu incidentally is the only state which does not require registration under the Shops and Establishment. It is adequate if you have compliance to Shops and Establishment Act. But there also you have every, like they have used every alphabet, K, Form J, Form L, Form M. You will have one whole shopping list of forms to be maintained in that. Now, weekly hours should not exceed 48 hours, daily hours should not exceed 9, you cannot have working, you cannot have overtime. So all this you have to comply if you are a factory employing. You may be manufacturing, but if you don't have more than 10 people or 20 people, then you don't come under the definition of Factories Act. You must see whether Factories Act you must read in conjunction with workers and things like that. So you have to deal with everything in its totality. But the point is, you may be manufacturing, you may be using some materials to store or use or buy those materials. Sometimes you may require a license. So many places, for instance, you're doing some heat treatment and things like that. You require I know this thing, cyanide and things like that used to be used. You require a specific license. Overlapping shifts is not prohibited. So these are, as suffice to say that if you know you are a factory, you have to comply with various things. As I said, if you are not a manufacturing, all others are shops and establishment. So all of you all have to necessarily comply with the requirements of shops and establishment. Unfortunate part with this thing is, none of them have still recognized electronic records. Shops and establishment, everything has to be maintained manually. Attendance register, that register, this register, you have to, holiday list has to be stuck, everything is manual. You require one wall to stick that itself. shops and establishment registration is not required. You have to go and just file. Usually they'll have a jurisdictional office in all these places. I think I think anything coming under in this place, I think most probably the jurisdiction will come in that Greenways Road. The Tahsildar's office is there, no? Which is there only the shops and inspector used to sit, go and file him and give him the forms and say he is not going to bother. He'll just take it and throw it in one corner. But at least one acknowledgement, Chapa, you said I gone and delivered this with you. It is my job is done. Every year you have to give your annual list of holidays. You got to give maintain. See, as I said, some joker will just come around. He has got nothing else to do. He'll come around and say, "Okay, I'm come for inspection." He'll say, "You have to maintain a notebook for him to make his comments and things like that." He'll make his comments, and you have next time some other fellow come and show. You'll have to make this thing like that. We have lost so many notebooks, and we said nobody has come. He'll suddenly have said, "No, nobody has come. I have recorded." So you would have lost a notebook. That's happened in my office itself. Anyway, that's we have to deal with that in its own.
This also happens that the registered office is in a different state, but your operation is a different state. So you have to take the certificate for both these.
Yeah. That is, as I said, once you are registered, every state of this thing, you are supposed to follow the. Suppose your registered office is in Karnataka and you are operating here, you have to come. You have to register in both the places.
This side.
Shops and Establishment Act. That's a state law. This is Tamil Nadu Shops and Establishment Act. They will have Karnataka Shops and Establishment Act. Kerala Shops and Establishment. You will have Karnataka registration is there. Concept of registration under the Karnataka Shops and Establishment Act is there. Tamil Nadu does not have a registration concept. We have a serious problem explaining to people when they come for this thing, saying no, there is no registration in Tamil Nadu.
For Karnataka, there is an online way of.
You can go and register in this thing. But ultimately, the last mile is not addressed. You have to go and deliver there. So, okay, I should have asked, how many of you all have registered under the Udyoga Aadhar for MSME? Please go do it. Anyway, I'll come because that's also an existential one, because please, it's important that you go and register yourself. Boilers, okay, since you are weights and measures, if anybody is this thing, there is a specific act. There is no dearth for laws and rules in India, but you can Google will definitely throw up something for everything. So thank God for small mercies that Google is available now. Earlier we used to go and sit and search whether these laws, and some will have the in front of it, some will not have, some will have state in front of it. At least now we can go and quickly search and say, okay, Tamil Nadu, it gives you something and throws up all these things. But in food, if you are engaged in food packaging and things like that, FSSAI license is required. Like even today, for instance, earlier the Swiggies and Zomatos were having a free run, but today they also have to be registered, and they cannot pick up and offer delivery unless the establishment from where they are making the pickup is registered under FSSAI. They cannot offer services from unregistered. So government is also making its own this thing to try to bring everybody into the somewhere ultimately, when all these lines get connected, and that is really big data, because we think that government doesn't know and things like that. When all these lines start, it gets tied up somewhere into one system with some common registration numbers, PAN number, directed DIN number, everything will come suddenly. Everything will get linked together and say this company is big. How come it is not appearing on the radar of the taxman? Like for instance, a couple of days back in Karnataka, in Bangalore, they found that an auto driver was owning a big villa. Couple of years back it would have gone unnoticed, but not anymore. Definitely it will throw up, the moment you register, you have to have a PAN. If a person buying a big house without a PAN, he can register, but he will come back and say, why is a person who has bought such a big house does not have a PAN? What is the source?